We talked about all that recently. We're going to go in a little bit deeper on the current state of GOP ag campaign strategy. And for that, we're going to welcome our guest tonight. He is the digital communications manager for America's Voice. He also manages GOPadtracker.com, a searchable database of racist and xenophobic dog whistle ads. He writes regularly about immigration and nativist politicians and organizations for America's Voice. Prior to joining them, he was a union organizer and worked researching far right politics. Everybody, welcome to the show, Zachary Mueller. Zach, what's up, man?
Glad to be here. Big fan of the show.
Oh,
What's
thank you.
up?
Thanks for joining us. So I guess let's start with the Youngkin race and those ads. Like I'm sure you saw the one we were just talking about. It went kind of viral.
Mhm.
That lady was so upset about her little baby boy reading this filth, and
Yeah.
he was a
For,
17-year-old honor student.
to
Mark.
contextualize for people that, if they didn't see the episode a couple weeks ago, there was a lady talking about her son having to read a Toni Morrison book, but the her words were laid over B-roll of Black Lives Matter protests and a few burning trash cans and cars and shit. So it was like it. What that lady's complaint is stupid, but even if you believe she has a complaint, the ad was totally fucking race baiting. It was like gross and sad and ridiculous. Yeah.
So Zach, like, talk a little bit about sort of the origin of that strategy, I guess, how effective it was, how they landed on that, and then also I want to get into what the response could have or should have been. How do you counter things like that? But yeah, just let's get started.
Yeah, so the Youngkin campaign was like kind of fooling around trying to figure out what their message was going to be throughout the election. I mean, this is basically just kind of like a guy that they kind of like pulled out to try to win this race. They try to like craft him in a laboratory here, and he back in April started to kind of pick up on this. Fox News generated some of this kind of activity that was happening on the ground around school boards, around critical race theory. So he started to pick this up, and he thought he could run with this, and kind of filter off the energy that was happening on the ground and kind of some of the local right wing energy and take it into his campaign. So back in April, he started to really kind of pick this up to his base and kind of move it, talking about that he was going to ban critical race theory, kind of picking up where some other Republican governors, whether that be in Florida, like with DeSantis, or in other Republican governors throughout the country, that were kind of banning critical race theory as a way to kind of burnish their cred, and an ability to kind of pass off what is a racist dog whistle, meaning that they're not explicitly saying anything racist, and it
Mm-hmm.
allows them to have the plausible deniability both for themselves and for their viewers to say, oh, no, 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 we're not talking about anything racist here. Actually, you are the racist because you're the ones bringing up race here. We're actually trying to teach kids, to love everybody, no matter the color of their skin. Meanwhile, being able to insert race into the conversation and stoke racial anxieties, um, as a political tool to turn out voters. So that ends up becoming his strategy going all the way up through the election to really kind of mobilize both any kind of Republican support across the board under this kind of race-based banner, and really running a racist campaign.
For people that don't are familiar with I'm sure if you guys don't know who Lee Atwater is, I would recommend googling him. I don't want to show the video. There's audio of him. You can listen to this on YouTube, where he describes the Southern strategy. He was the guy who sort of formulated it for Nixon and Reagan. It was like basically like you in the 50s and 60s, you go around screaming N word, N word, N word, and he actually said the word. And he goes, then you start talking about segregation. You start talking about school choice and school rights. You start talking about income taxes and welfare queens. And by the time you get to that, you're still saying the inward, inward, inward stuff, but you're so far away from it rhetorically that no one knows how to criticize it, right? So it's like this is kind of going backwards 20 years from that. It's sort of like it's so weird how even more racialized this is than the normal welfare queen sort of bullshit that Republicans run on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
What
very much the same strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Uh,
And what about the fact that, like, critical race theory as an actual concept and everything isn't actually taught in any public schools in Virginia and whatnot? Like, this was, one of their boogeymen that they come up with every so often that they seem to just fabricate out of thin air and just run with it. And, you know, why is that so effective? Is it just that it plays off these underlying just racist tendencies that are there already? But also, like, what do you do in the face of something like that? It's got to be frustrating because you can say to your blue in the face, this isn't real. They're just making this up, but if it doesn't matter, then where the hell do you go from there?
Yeah, so I very much so that there's kind of finding a new boogeyman each time around, right? So back in 2017 in Virginia in that governor's race, really the kind of made up idea that there was these sanctuary cities all over the state of Virginia, and that's what they were running on, really anti-immigrant, kind of xenophobic dog whistles. Again, it's just kind of this made up idea to fearmonger around non-white others. And again, right, it critical race theory is an obscure legal theory about understanding how we think about how race pervades our society and how very much it still is affecting our politics, our law, and all the other institutions. But they're able to kind of use this and then kind of mull it and move it around. So it ends up becoming something like parents' rights or something else like that. So it becomes really obscure, like Mark was talking about, just about to be able to allow voters to be able and politicians to say, look, I'm not talking about race here, even though race is really the active ingredient moving people to the polls and then kind of getting that kind of anxiety, whether it's conscious or unconscious from the voters themselves. But I think in a way, to answer your kind of like follow-up question is really how do you respond to this stuff? Because clearly Terry McAuliffe's campaign, which was the Democrat who ran in Virginia, didn't do it very well. Mm-hmm. He tried. And clearly it was not successful. It was a little bit not enough and a little bit too late. So I think really the most important thing for folks to think about this is that if we're trying to combat GOP's like strategic racism, their racist dog whistles that they're using in August before an election, that's much too late. We're just kind of responding at that point. I think about this as really a way of trying to inoculate other folks around us, and I think Democrats could do this as well too, but also other folks as well, to understand and really name the Republican strategy, which is to strategically use race as a means to harm all working class people for their own benefit. Because that's really what's at stake here, right? It isn't that just Youngkin or some of these other Republicans are using racism because, oh, that's a moral bad and racism is bad. Sure, it is. But it ends up in policies that really end up hurting not only people of color, but also working class white people as well. It's the reason why, we can't have Medicaid expansion, access to affordable college, higher wages, good union laws. Like the GOP that ends up using these kinds of strategic racism end up blocking the ability for working class people to benefit. And so I think that's why it's really important for us to think about and understand, really name that game. And then I think also then pivot back and tell a different story to say, look, they want to talk about, if they want to say critical race theory, what that actually means is banning books in schools. It means, not teaching our kids like our real history, good and the bad. And we don't really want politicians in there picking out the curriculum, right? And we don't want white supremacists like being able to exnay books out of our public schools, right? That's a majoritarian opinion. I think the folks that kind of want that, right, are on a small marginal that ain't really worth talking to either.
Even then, like the optics of it, like the optics of burning and banning books are bad, but there's a school board in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, which is the county outside of Fredericksburg where I went to college, where the school board was like, yeah, we're going to burn they literally said we're going to burn the books. It was like wild. I can't believe people are going to get away with this shit, but it's nuts to me that this hustle still works, but it does seem to work. And do you want to watch some ads so we can see how cool this shit looks in reality? Because some of these ads are pretty action movie style. There's some ads that Zach dug up in his research and his report he wrote for the organization he works for. Say the name of the organization again, Matt, because I'm blanking on it right now. America's Voice, right?
I'm Jessica Taylor, and I'm here to launch my campaign for United States Senate. I'm a working mom of 3 and a small business owner who was raised in rural Alabama to love God, guns, family, fishing, and four-wheeling. But today, in Kamala's America, I fear everything we hold dear here in Alabama is under attack by socialists, big tech, and the radical liberals in D.C. The woke police and the fake news media are destroying our democracy. And y'all, I'm fit to be tied. It's long past time serious conservatives like us rise up and help finish Trump's mission of draining the swamp.
All right.
The truth is, the left wants to keep lying.
If you can
Pause
fast
it.
forward
Yeah.
some,
Yeah, so the race part's there. Obviously, Kamala's America, which is a weird way to phrase what's going on. Also, they showed a picture of an athlete at the Olympics not turning away during the national anthem or whatever. And then, so Alabama's a big NASA state, which is assuming is why she's using rocket iconography. But she loaded a newspaper, some woke books, and a Twitter avatar into this rocket. Now watch what happens. She puts on sunglasses.
See, all the commie stuff is in the rocket. See, she put all the commie stuff in the rocket, and then she sends it to space. I don't
The Russians beat us to space. It used to be a bad thing.
Right. Yeah. But like, I like the sunglasses, the utilization of the sunglasses there, because it's like, was that just for maximum badassery? Like, she wasn't looking at the rocket. She puts them on, explodes the rocket behind her, and then takes them back off once the rocket's out of frame. So yeah, like, you just had to have the sunglasses there for the sweet ass rocket shot that they had. But what's up with this, Zach? About, like, it's not, so they love things they love, like xenophobia and racism and dog whistles and whatnot, but also silly action movie bullshit. They're always blowing stuff up and jumping out of shit and shooting things and stuff like that. Like, where did all that come from? You think?
Yeah, I don't know if I could give you the origin of why they do silly shit. But I think it's a bit, right, like they're doing this kind of thing that I think I've heard you all talk about this before too, right? Like, if you're in on the joke, right? Trump is funny. And I think like that's a little bit what's going on here too, right? Like this action movie style, like it's a bit like, if you like this shit, if you like burning books, which is like actually what's happening here, in one of the scenes, she takes Ibram X. Kennedy's How to Be an Anti-Racist and loads it in the rocket and blows up the rocket. Sets the rocket on fire. So, but it's kind of like a wink and a nod, like, look, we want to kind of be funny. It also, I think, is trying to like be a little bit of a shock value because they're trying to get noticed. So she is running as a Senate candidate in an Alabama Republican primary. And a lot of these primary ads are where between GOP is where you're going to see some of the worst and some of the craziest ads. It's because it's like GOP people trying to out racist each other and out crazy each other to get noticed.
It's time to take a sledgehammer.
Just kind of one last thing. So she has released several other like different like shots and videos to make sure that she could prove everybody that she actually did blow that rocket up. It's like been the mainstay of her campaign, is to prove she did light that rocket on fire and it did go up in the air. And it was actually a pretty big explosion. So she's very proud of that. So,
all right.
She did an 8th grade science project. I'm very proud of her. Good for her.
Yeah.
All right. This is Carrie Lake from the Arizona governor's race. Just the first few seconds, Matt, if you could watch the badassery here.
The mainstream media's lies and propaganda.
There we go.
The corporate media establishment
boy.
flat out lies to people, and no one is holding them accountable. They exploit misinformation. They use it to manipulate the masses. They use fear-mongering to create a scared and broken population. It's right out of a communist playbook. I know this because I used to work for the mainstream media.
Matt, you could cut that.
So this lady was the most frightening to me because later on that video, she does use the word cabal, which is Q lingo. Mm-hmm. And she also uses the famous, this is just how cynical this is. So there's a video that went viral. This guy, Timothy, I'm blanking on his last name, tracks media clips all over the country. Used a bunch of clips from Sinclair Broadcasting, which is a huge Trump supporting, Trump media conglomerate that has must-run segments where they talk straight to camera about how your country is being destroyed and whatever. And she used those simultaneously clips to show that actually the liberal media is rigged. And that is just chef's kiss. I admire her moxie for that. This lady is going places. She's evil, totally. Yeah.
Speaking of totally evil, so another thing they like to do, they are the ones who are actually being persecuted. I've no more persecuted group in this country than white Christians. I think we've all learned that by now. They are the ones who are having their freedoms obstructed and all of that. They really think that they're being held down underneath the foot of the man. And if you want a perfect example of this sort of bass-ackwards type of ideology, look no further than Nevada Senate candidate Adam Laxalt. I probably said that wrong, but let's watch the first little bit of his ad, which really highlights what I'm talking about.
My kids can't get enough of Star Wars. We've watched all 9 movies twice and counting. They love it because it's a story about right and wrong, good versus evil. In our house and at our church, we talk a lot about what's right and what's wrong. And right now, it seems like the wrong side is winning. The radical left, rich elites, woke corporations, academia, Hollywood, and the media, they're taking over America.
Yeah.
So, Zach, my question to you is, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, like, we've seen this, like, not just in this ad, but a lot of other Republicans use very similar tactics, right? So I think, whether it be the Carrie Lake ad or this Adam Laxalt ad, right, they're doing a sense of inoculation that I was talking about. I think that it's important, right? So they're inoculating their own base and their own viewers to say, look, you can't trust anybody out here besides us. Like, don't trust the media. Don't trust anybody that says that we're using, racism or anything else. Like, we are the ones that are incorrect, and then they pivot and use this, says, well, it's actually, we're the ones fighting against, these rich elites, these corporations, we're the ones, really trying to, have this beautiful, anti-racist America, which is very much laughable. But I think, like, for most folks that are not politically active, right, hear that and you're like, okay, well, that sounds great. And so I think, what they're tapping into, right, is ability to do another kind of bit on their dog whistles, right? So they put this out, and then they can say, well, look, I'm not the racist one here. Like, we're fighting big corporations. I'm the one that's really trying to get, civility going on. Meanwhile, people like Adam Laxalt and other Republicans are the ones getting massive tax breaks to billionaires and corporations, right? Yeah. Not actually addressing real people's concerns, right?
No,
and so
they are
really
the
just
empire.
Kind of a scam. Yeah,
they are 100% the empire. They think they're the, like, scrappy rebels, whatever. When they're
for those listening to the podcast, we start talking about the empire. It was showing his beautiful little white children play acting as rebels, and then over footage of Kamala and BLM protesters and whatever, who are obviously supposed to be the empire. So BLM protesters are the empire here. And his rich white children are the rebels. Now, 3 funny things about this. One, he said that we watched 9 Star Wars movies. There's fucking 11 movies, dude.
There
you gotta count Rogue One and Solo.
That's right. Let's get it.
Secondly, I forget what the second one was, but the third one I was going to say is that George Lucas has been explicit in the allegory that is Star Wars. America is the empire, and the Viet Cong were the rebels. Now, I don't want to get fucking too deep into that analogy right now, but he obviously doesn't even know anything about the goddamn movies he supposedly worships. So that part drove me a little nuts.
Yeah, for sure. The whole thing is bass-ackwards. Zach, before we let you go, I wanted to make sure and ask you about one other aspect of this, and that's, like, the way that the media seems to cover it. I'm talking about the Youngkin thing in particular, and critical race theory. It was very much this thing, and not just, I think pretty sure we talked about it on the show too. It wasn't just like Fox News. It was on CNN and other outlets where, like, there was this whole narrative that's like, listen, this is a real thing. This is a real concern that real parents have, and to act like otherwise is just, disingenuous or whatever, which was always annoying to me because, yeah, these people are fired up about it, but it doesn't make it real. It doesn't mean it isn't some, ginned up boogeyman or whatever, just to serve the purpose of riling them up. Like, you could talk about that instead of just acting like it deserves to be taken seriously because a bunch of fucking frothing at the mouth rubes are upset about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think this was one of the main problems with how the Democrats in Virginia and led by Terry McAuliffe handled this, right? Is that they said, "Hey, this is a racist dog whistle," and then they stepped back and then hoped that the media wouldn't take it at face value, and then they wouldn't cover it, and they would say, "Well, this is just kind of like." Made up racist garbage really to try to inflame racist anxieties, right? And they really thought that the media was going to go ahead and run with that and be fine. We didn't have to deal with it as Democrats or as other people, which I think is actually something that's going to get us in trouble if we continue to believe that is the case, because Republicans and their allies are very good, and they've been developing this strategy over many years, which is to create this whatever kind of new outrage, new dog whistle, new boogeyman that they want to put forward. And then they, in their kind of right-wing media sphere on Newsmax or OAN and then Fox News, and they kind of drum it up over and over again. And then Republican politicians say, hey, the other media isn't covering this. It's biased. They're kind of working the rest of it. Well, CNN isn't covering this. Only Fox News is covering this. Only Fox News is covering this. And they kind of really blow it up and kind of beat up on mainstream reporters and say you should cover this, you should cover this. And so mainstream reporters think, well, okay, well, I need to be objective, and I'm really scared about this, or seeing that I'm need to not be seen as like a liberal here, and so I'm going to take these arguments that the Republicans are saying, and then I'm going to then use them and put them towards the candidate. So the Terry McAuliffe was constantly, like you were saying, Trey, was to say, what do you say to parents about this critical race theory in schools, yada, yada, yada. And then Republicans will then take that when it shows up on CNN and then blow it up on their own channels to prove that they are right. To say, look, even CNN is calling it critical race theory is a problem. And which is a real problem because this wasn't ever about education at all. Right. But I think if we hope that the media, the way it currently exists, is going to call these things out, we're really shooting ourselves in our foot, and we need to be, as Democrats need to, do their part to actually talk about this stuff, lean in, explain it to people. That's their job, is to communicate political issues to people. But I think also other organizations, the great work that you all do here, right, continue to explain to folks that calling out this kind of game for what it is. Because I don't think we can kind of really hope that the folks in the media, because they benefit from this kind of horse race, will they, won't they kind of thing. And Republicans have a strategy knowing that they're not going to call Republicans racists. After 4 years of Donald Trump, that it took them 4 years to call Donald Trump a racist and a liar, they are unwilling to do that work. And so I think if we rely on that, we're going to be in a very bad position, and it's going to actually uninform and put a lot of disinformation around, friends and family and other community members who, may not believe this stuff, but if that's all they're hearing, they think, well, it's probably about education, and kind of feed the racist dog whistle.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you for joining us, Zach. I want to give you an opportunity to, if there's anything you want people to check out, follow you somewhere or follow your work or anything like that, anything you think people should know about, then let us know. But we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, again, glad to be here. Big fan of your guys' show. So I do a searchable database. So of all the different ads from local school board on up to presidential, that anytime that anybody's running racist or xenophobic ads, so that you guys can look at that, see as a candidate in my area that's running these ads, you can kind of take a look at there. It's searchable by candidate, state, topic, stuff like that. It's at gopadwatch.com. And then on my Twitter handle at Zachary A. Mueller, every day I kind of do an update on here's what the kind of crazy ads that are happening on Republicans, kind of the racist stuff that's happening. So if you're kind of looking for a more daily update for whatever reason, if you want to look at this kind of racist garbage as much as I do, I kind of have that there to kind of keep you up to date on kind of what's going on there, to continue to call out and kind of shine a light on this stuff. Because I do think it's important to say, look, some Republicans are going to try to say, look, I'm a nice guy in a sweater vest. I'm not actually a racist. And I think if we can kind of point that out, I think that's really helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, check him out. GOPadwatch.com, Zachary A. Mueller on Twitter. Thank you once again for joining us, Zach. We'll see you.